how do you suffer some defeats without being defeated? How do you turn poison into medicine? How can you be vulnerable and create something so that people can use your experience to understand how to be empathetic, not only to other people, but to themselves because you've put yourself out there?
Child, we did it.
Woo woo.
Woo,
We
woo.
here.
We are here with a whole podcast.
A
A whole podcast, not half a podcast, a
Whole
whole podcast.
That's right, 100.
Welcome to the Creative Cut Up Podcast, a lively and honest space for storytellers that sits at the intersection of craft, business, and independence. I'm Felicia Pride, a writer, director, producer, head honey and honey child, and head storyteller of the Create Daily, a platform I founded in 2012 to help storytellers, especially those of us who are historically excluded, thrive creatively and professionally. And I'm here with my co-host because we got some cutting up to do.
We sure do. I'm Dria Rowland, the creative executive at Honey Child, and a writer and producer.
Yes, she is.
And I'm Georgette Pierre, a voice actor and producer. You can hear it, right?
Oh, we hear that
That's
voice,
right.
honey.
Oh,
we
yeah.
hear the voice.
yeah.
So join us weekly where we talk shop and smack and share the good, the bad, and the ugly. 'Cause child.
Listen.
Listen.
And from 3 different perspectives, which I love, providing tangible tips to support your creative practice, your career, and your artist self. Because we all know that being an artist is hard as hell.
Oof.
Say that.
But the Creative Cut Up is here to help. Shall we begin, ladies?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Hey, and welcome to another installment of the Creative Cut Up Podcast. So
Welcome
happy
back.
to be here. And the whole crew is here. We got Dria, we got Georgette.
Oh, it's
Yes.
been a
We
minute.
all back. Because Dria, you've been traveling. Where you been at?
I've been around the world, literally.
Ay,
I was in London for a couple weeks, frolicking. That was exciting.
Yes. I love that word,
Um,
frolic, to frolic.
That's what it's about.
Yes.
We deserve, yes. And then, your girl been back in therapy. That's a good place
Oh,
to be.
fantastic.
As well.
And
So,
speaking
yeah.
of therapy, we have a whole episode about
sure
therapy.
do.
Which number is
Okay.
that, Georgette?
Please.
I believe it's episode 10.
Episode 10. Check
Okay.
it out.
Check it out.
Okay.
Well, I love that idea of frolicking and therapy and how it feeds the creative soul and how life can feed our
Absolutely.
creativity, which I think is such a great segue because we have a special surprise today. We have a wonderful guest in the house, Dahéli Hall. And we're going to be talking
Yeah.
about, we're going to be talking about that, how you can, transfer life experience into beautiful art. So we want to welcome Dahéli
Absolutely.
officially. Dahéli Hall is a versatile performer, writer, and director based in LA, known for her work on Netflix Dear White People and Fox's Mad TV. She's currently touring with her award-winning comedy show SPADURA, an autobiographical love story that explores Dahéli's journey through fertility challenges with humor and vulnerability. With credits spanning television, film, and digital content, Dahéli is a graduate at NYU's Tisch and USC Stark program and is a member of SAG-AFTRA and the WGA. She's proud of her Haitian and Jamaican heritage and is dedicated to promoting diversity and professional development in the entertainment industry. Welcome to Dahéli.
Thank you so much, Felicia,
Welcome.
Dria, Georgette. I'm so excited to be here with you ladies. It's right off my birthday, so I feel like you're like a little birthday gift for this Gemini lady right here.
Well, we love being a gift, honey. We love being a
Yes.
gift. Well, I want to talk about your journey a little bit in terms
Yeah.
of your artistic journey. You've had such an interesting journey. Like we're talking about writing on Mad TV. Because when I think
Yes.
about, especially coming off the strike and all this talk around AI, one thing that I think that's going to continue to be with us is live performance. Like, I don't know how you AI that. So I would love to talk about your show and how it came about, how you even go about creating a one-woman show. So that's what we're going to get into. But just a little bit about your journey, like, because you've had such an interesting career path.
I always knew what I wanted to be. At 10 years old, I got my first job, and it was a regional play in Miami, Wait Until Dark.
Wow.
Yes,
Wow.
I was in the Miami Herald, this like little 10-year-old.
Wow.
And I was like, let's leave Miami right now and move to New York. And my parents, my parents are first generation, so they didn't like move to this country to satisfy their child's dreams. They were trying to,
Yeah.
live their own dreams. And so they were
Right.
like, why don't you finish school? And then if that's what you want to do, you can take on that. But it is I did not have like the Knowles family or like the Swift or even the Joe Jackson kind of, we're going to throw it all into that. But what I did have was a real example of them being entrepreneurs, especially my father. My father's an architect, but he did so many like businesses while I was growing up. He did a beauty pageant, Miss Haiti. He started
Wow.
in Art Basel. He did Overtown and started the Art Africa and Art Basel and Art of Black that is currently now. So I've always had these examples, and my mother was very creative in terms of her things that she's done, and diverse in her her career pursuits, and shifted off into teaching from nursing, and I realized you can segue from different professions. So I got great examples of them, of entrepreneurship, and it's never too late to transition into something else. So I immediately moved to New York and went to Tisch, NYU, and I did experimental theater wing. So you can already see that I was intuitively knowing.
And I hear that experimental theater at NYU is experimental. Like y'all are really
they were known for like taking off their clothes, doing wild things, getting naked. It was the first time I was like, oh wow, we were like rolling around the floor, vocal work, massage. I was like, I learned a lot about myself and being free, and I did really, really well in that environment. But it was still a structure of a university. I graduated early. I had AP credits. My parents were like, you graduated early. Why don't you travel? And I was like, no, I have to hit the ground running in New York with this pavement. Like I was just so obsessed about like getting the dream. And whoever's listening, you should just travel. I mean, you're 20, 21, like just go. I feel like with my generation, I'm in my 40s too, we were really kind of like the tail end of Gen X. So we were kind of conditioned to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like suck it up. If you ask for help, it's weakness. As women, we had to kind of choose which we wanted to be. Do you want to be a mother, or do you want to have your career? And a lot of the things, women that I had seen in that I looked up to, especially in the comedic sense, never seemed to have partners, or even like if they made it big. Oprah's a billionaire, but it was always like that. We understood that she had to sacrifice something. There was always like something that had to be sacrificed. If you want this, you can't have that. And I think I was comfortable with making that sacrifice because, like I said, at 10 years old, I knew what my dream was. So I started doing stand-up in New York. And what brought me to LA is I did an off Broadway show with a girlfriend of mine, where we took our poetry and we rented a theater, and it was called Spilling Black Ink. And we put on a production, and it was so great. And I liked the agency of that, because at that point I was just like auditioning, and I realized that I wasn't the right type. I was a character, and none of that. I was never exposed to any of that in NYU. I could be any kind of person I wanted. I was an actor. But once I got out into the real world, then I had lanes that fit what I was capable of doing. And so that's why I was like, well, I'm going to start writing my own material. I'm doing my own stand-up. I'm doing my own shows. And then I thought perhaps I really want to try it in film and television. And so I'll apply to grad school for producing for film and television. And I went to USC. But it was the first time, they had never heard of multi-hyphenates before. And I was like, so let me tell you what I do. I am a performer.
I'm an actor, singer, writer.
Exactly. But I was like, I produce my own work that I write and perform it. And they're like, no, ma'am, nobody, you have to either be a performer or a writer. And I was like, and sometimes I would do my own projects, and people would be like, that's really great. Do you want to produce my things? And I was like, no, I produce my stuff. I'll perform in your stuff or write for you.
Right.
But But it was funny because that was also the time that YouTube started. And I had a friend of mine tell me, you should just do YouTube. And I was like, sir, I am in film school. Okay. I'm not going to do some silly cat video. I am making art, and my first film was on 35 millimeter to just like prove that point. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So,
Yeah.
okay. So you were in LA but how did that discourage you from continuing to produce your own work, or over the course of your career, were you continuing to produce your own work? Did you take some
Yeah.
breaks?
So right after I graduated, I went to Sundance as an assistant for a literary manager. And right away I was like, oh my God, I cannot be at a festival where I'm not the artist. Like, this is not what I want to do. So I went back and I met up with like an assistant at the time. His name was Tendo Nagenda. And he's now, and he and I, yeah.
Of
And I was
Netflix.
like, he was a Netflix, and he just finished doing Book of Clarence. I had a friend of mine, his name was John Chu from USC, and he had done a short film that was circulating.
Like
John Chu, yes.
So, I love how you're like, and then I
said that's
I
so
know,
casual.
I have this friend Tenda and this other friend John.
Wait a minute.
It seems like a flex, but it's a purposeful flex because I have seen, and I'm going to throw up a little bit of the gender race card a little bit, especially for women who are breaking barriers in a particular genre. Like, I think of like Julie Dash and even Gina Prince Bythewood, who made these films, and then like the second thing was like such a slog for them to be. There are definitely some obstacles I put in my own way, but the kind of like, oh my gosh, this is really cool work. How can we support you in your next endeavor? Kind of support that happens sometimes with young filmmakers who've done something that people think are interesting did not happen in that way for me. And that's okay. But I say that because particularly at the time of the early to mid aughts, me as this like auteur, writer, director, performer, actress was, I think, not what people understood. Do you know what I mean? So when I gave, long story short, I gave Tendo the script, and he was like, I love this short film. It was about the revolution happening and one brother not getting the memo. And that brother was Gary Anthony Williams. And it was so funny because the following year he did Undercover Brother. So it was like perfect. And we did this film, and the DP of it was Alice Brooks, who's also doing Wicked for John Chu now.
Nice.
And I was like, this is it. And we were a short film finalist at ABFF. And it was funny because Lee Daniels was one of our judges. And I remember the night before the award ceremony, he was like, I really loved your film. I'm so sorry you guys didn't win. And they were like, the award ceremony is tomorrow. And he was like, well, I'll tell you who voted against y'all, because they thought it was too militant. And but yeah, so here I was like talking about militant stuff, and people just saw me as this angry Black lady. But I was using comedy to address racism. Like, that's always how I've been used comedy, is like to use comedy to address topics that were a challenge and a struggle. And the second short I had was Mandingo in a Box. It was trying to address endangered Black men as an endangered species, whether it's because of prison or police violence or because they're dating non-Black women. And so these two Black women who are roommates, one of them gets a Mandingo in a Box doll and the other one fights to try to steal it from her. And so that was, it was like pre-AI, all of this kind of things. And it was all also, very pro-Black, which in like 2000, in the mid 2000s was not like really
I was gonna say this was really early. You were ahead of the times for sure.
And I thought that would be where I was gonna go, Felicia. I was like, I'll just continue making these films, these short films, and maybe a feature happening. And my friends who were helping me produce these projects, they were moving up the ranks in the development track. But I like quit my job. I was like, this is my life. I will do whatever it takes, but I don't want to be at some like studio. I want to make my
Yeah.
work. And I was doing groundlings at the time. And I thought maybe I could go through groundlings and then rise up the ranks that way. And what I didn't realize that with groundlings, you have to like hang out. Like you have to like have drinks with people. And I was making my short films. And so, but I was doing really well in class. I would do great with the showcases. And then when it came to being on the team, they were like, we really wish you had hung out more. You know, we really wish you had.
Can we talk about this for a minute? Because I do think this is a really big issue for non-white people in particular, and certain non-white people, because sometimes I don't want to hang out. It's a lot to have to even be in this space and to show up with excellence in this space, and then to use my free time to hang out when I don't necessarily. They may be great people, they may not, I don't know, but it's a lot of emotional work that you even have to do to show up in these spaces. And to add on top of that additional work of like hanging out and maybe not being able to be your full self when you're hanging, I feel like that is something that we have to deal with, that actually is a hindrance to us moving up and moving, through these ranks, for sure, that we don't talk enough about.
What it is low-key saying, I need to evaluate whether I'm comfortable with you. And so you have to put in time with me for me to assess if you're cool, where I feel comfortable around you. And the fact of the matter is, I like hanging out. I'm very fun. I have a lot of friends. I wouldn't have even minded it. I was just working on my films and working on my things. So I did not know that. I was still under the, like I said earlier, with my education and my parents,
that my work would be enough.
Yes, of a meritocracy, of thinking I would just do the work. I'm an A student. I just have to do the work, grind it out. And that is not how it works here. Like, it literally took me, I think it took me like over 10 years of being in this industry to realize that I was working harder and not smarter. Like I was just grinding and not just like, because I've told this story before, but because I remember being at a party, just having a good time, dancing, laughing, cracking jokes. I was just on one. And the next day I got called into a meeting, or got called to see if that I would want to staff for a television show. And I was like, wait, from the party you saw me at last night where I was maybe on a table? I don't know. They're like, yes, that lady. And I was like, oh my God, don't look at her. I mean, I can like button it up. And so I never realized that being my like authentic self or what have you, or whatever it is, was actually these kind of respectability politics that I was trained on as like first generation Caribbean person doesn't really work here in Los Angeles or in Hollywood.
Well, let's talk about that, because in your solo show, your one-woman show, SPADURA, you are really being your authentic self. You are being very vulnerable. How did you get to the point of like, I need to write this and I need to put this show up? And what was that process like for you? And the decision making, like it's time to do this. Acting on your ideas is a form of self-love. And when I decided to write the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal, it was with you in mind. Storytellers with stories inside of you that you need to get out into the world. But life, fear, uncertainty has a way of leaving us stuck. But no more. It's time to reclaim our creative practice and get unstuck. The Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal can help you get back on creative track. 30 days of dynamic prompts, exercises to stimulate creativity, alongside motivational quotes, journal pages, and more. If you're ready to create again, get your copy of the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal today at creativecomeback.com. That's creativecomeback.com. Because it's never too late to become the artist you always wanted to be.
So SPADURA is like my maybe fourth one-woman show. And then when I got married, I did another solo show because I joke about it in SPADURA that I got more congratulations for getting married than for any professional or personal achievement in my life. And so I was like, I just got married.
Wild.
Yeah, it's just married. And so I did that with my friend who was a producer that I met in film school. And I was like, can we shoot my wedding, but then also do like an improvised stand-up show with it, and then like almost make it like a mockumentary style. I like the rawness of it, but because it was the grittiness felt for other people like it was hard for them to gaze because it seemed like it needed to be more polished, I guess, to be understood. And so when I got to doing SPADURA, it was 2020 I thought was going to be my year. I was in a film at Sundance, Bad Hair. I had just sold a show to BET, and I was writing on Dear White People and acting on it. And I was like, the world is my oyster, bring it.
Yeah.
And then by March.
And it was brought.
It was brought. And so I was like, well, I'll just spend the pandemic doing what everyone else is trying to do, get pregnant or in shape. And I could not do either. Get pregnant nor get in shape. 2020 went. Nothing was happening. 2021 went. And not only that, Felicia, my projects were also like that BET, because you know this, you sell a show, it does not mean it makes it to air. And so you're like, oh,
which we had a whole episode about. We had a whole episode explaining what it means when you sell a TV show. Yeah.
Yes.
So many steps to get to air.
So many steps. And then I had another show that I was also scheduled to be like the showrunner if that happened also in 2020. By 2021, that went away too. So I was like, oh my gosh. And then my reps at the time were really playing hardball out of the gate in 2020. Like, no, she can do more. And then I was like, I can do anything at this point. Like, give me a job because everything is going away. And so I was so sad. Like all these things were gone.
It's a lot of grief. We don't talk about the grief aspect of projects going away. And then if you couple that with the grief you might have been experiencing in your personal life, just from the pandemic, but also the fertility journey you were on.
That's exactly what it was. It was grief. So in 2022, we could start performing again. Because we were kind of locked down for sure 2020 and a bit of 2021. But by 2022, people were starting to perform again. And then I said, my husband was kind of worried about me at this point. I have a great spiritual practice, but I felt like I was in like locked in syndrome. Do you know what I mean? Like I couldn't perform. I felt like I couldn't write anything because I was grieving so much. And so, I was always being asked, create something else. Maybe we can bring it out to the marketplace. But I was like, there's nothing I want to create except what I'm going through right now. And I tried to write a pilot of it and it was terrible. It's very difficult to write a pilot of your life. But I was like, I can do performance. So I kind of did an outline of the different things I was going through, rented a black box theater, invited a few friends, and presented it to them. Like, this is what I'm going through, friends. What do you all think? Is this even a show? And I did this after talking to my friend Elizabeth, who's producing it. And she was there on Zoom listening to it. And we got really great feedback. I broke down in the middle of it. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a comedy show. I don't know. And, but everyone was like, this is so raw and real. And not a lot of people talk about this. I think you should just really kind of continue to pursue this. My producer had different goals than I did. My producer wanted to take care of me and make sure that I was doing this as a cathartic experience and then have a good show. But the major thing was that I was not re-traumatizing myself by doing the show. Mm-hmm. My goal was different. My goal was to get a job, get back into relevancy, do a splash, and get pregnant all from it. Like, this show is going to fix me. This show will distract me from all that's going on. I was going through active IVF, Felicia. Like, I don't know if it was all the hormones I was injecting, but I was like, if the show does well, I have the money to keep going. And I use the money to make that baby. And everything's going to work out. It was like insane. And then Alyssa was just like, Dahéli, are you sure you want to keep doing it? And sometimes I'll be like, yes, I need to do the show. And then other days I'll be like, I can never do the show. I decided
That's
to
a
make
lot.
sure. Yeah, that's a
No,
lot.
I was just gonna say that's a lot because it's putting so much pressure on you and on the art, right? And we talk a
Mm,
lot about, first of all, the things that we can't control, but also like the expectations that we have of art to save us, which
save us.
it has such a beautiful capacity, but then we just like, no, 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 you have to save us. And if it doesn't, like, ooh, it's hard to come back from that. It's hard to come back from that. I had an experience not similar to this, but just in terms of putting so much pressure on the art to save me. And when it didn't, I was so bitter and resentful. And till I realized, like, no, that's not the job of the art, is not to save me. I'm to save myself.
Oh my gosh, I love that. You said it so succinctly. I wanted the art to save me. And you're exactly right. I mounted it in a Dynasty typewriter because it was a theater I always wanted to go to, and I was
Yeah.
like, I want people to understand that they need to take this seriously. But I did it in September of 2022, full sold out show. I was like, oh my gosh, everyone's here.
Yeah.
I didn't even have all of my lines down. I had just come up with the title of it just like a few weeks earlier. Like it was such a desperation for the show to save me.
Mm-hmm.
But the great thing about it was my parents were in the audience, my in-laws were there. It was the first time they had ever seen me perform. There was so much love in the room that
Mm-hmm.
I used it almost as a workshop to kind of a lot of the improvisation that I got just from the energy has stayed as locked in pieces of the show. Like some things
That's
that they've
amazing.
said, I was like just vibing off of them so hard that I like it became a part of the show. But when I really look at the show again, it was messy. Like it's it was not rehearsed to the degree that it needed to be. I realized that if I wanted this to be a thing, it was not going to happen on that show, September 25th, 2022. So that's why this year I'm shooting that special 2 years later, September 25th, 2024, because I still even had that savior moment. Like this show is going to save me in 2023, because that's when I wanted to shoot the special. But as you know, we had the writer and actor strike,
Yeah.
and I was like, because I felt like I was on a momentum. I was like, was doing my last gasp of fertility stuff with the last little bit of money I had. I was pushing myself. I went to New York. I won an award or best one woman show, best production, and I was like, I'm going to take this momentum to shoot and film the special at the end of 2023. And this writer strike, actor strike was just I was
Yeah.
so broken, and that's how you like how you described it earlier, like bitter, broken.
Mm.
I didn't the
Mm-hmm.
all of the fertility things I thought was going to happen in 2023 did not pan out. I didn't get my special, didn't pan out. It was just I felt sad. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead,
because
please.
I'm like really processing right now what you were doing. And now I'm like, this is wild. Like you
Yeah,
are doing an active piece about your fertility journey while you're on your fertility journey. We kind of talked about like having some space between things
yes,
so that you can kind of reflect, but you are in it
yeah.
and also performing in it. That's wild. That's a lot.
I don't recommend it for everyone, but I think the reason why I really wanted to do it was I did not want the distance of
Mm.
time and like understanding. I needed
Mhm.
to kind of put it in amber, the desperation and the angst and everything that I was feeling at exactly that moment. And so that was
Mm.
why I was
Mhm.
really challenged by my producer. I was challenged by my friend Elizabeth because she in December was like, we should try to do the show in 2024. And I was like, why? It didn't produce the
Mhm.
baby. I didn't get to do the special. Like, Now, if I bring it into 2024, it just seems like this lady who can't get over her infertility and just keeps dragging out this story year after year. Like, when is it enough is enough? And she was just like, it's a good show. Do you just want to do it over Zoom? Just let's read it out over Zoom. And I was really moved. And I said to her, it feels like a memoir, but it also feels important. And it actually helped because in 2024, like if you had seen the show in 2022 or even 2023, even a little bit of 2024, honestly, it would have felt all about my journey to get pregnant. And now the show has less, it's there, but it's more about how do you suffer some defeats without being defeated? How do you, and I use a tenet in my Buddhist practice, how do you turn poison into medicine? How can you be vulnerable and create something so that people can use your experience to understand how to be empathetic, not only to other people, but to themselves because you've put yourself out there. So then I was like, oh, this story has more importance than that.
And it's bigger than you.
Trying to get this baby
at this point.
And I'm addressing IVF that people don't talk about, like that it's not necessarily a cure-all, Black maternal health that is not really addressed. I'm also talking about the baby industrial complex. And so I'm talking about a lot of things that can be heavy and not necessarily maybe feel like a scientific or even an academic setting, but in a very human and comedic ways that makes it a little bit more accessible.
So I went to the show at the Lyric Hyperion. Yay. And so I just noticed that I think that it was a lot of amen in the room, right? And so what you're saying about touching on all these difficult topics that we don't see, it was clear that people wanted to see it and see it be addressed. I don't know if you felt that from the audience, but I mean, I'm looking at it, it was so diverse. It was men, it was women, and everybody was like, amen. And just, they really were responding to it. And it speaks to the fact that, there's a desire to see our different experiences represented. Like somebody has to do it, I really respect that you took on all those difficult topics and all those parts of yourself, all those intersectional pieces, because everybody in the room, it seemed like found something that could relate to them.
Oh, thank you so much, Dria. I appreciate that. I think that's also why now there's like a documentary team following me, because it is so odd to have a person be going through fertility treatments and trying to mount a show. But it's also a topic that is very au courant. I mean, like just a couple of weeks ago, we had, Senate Republicans try to block IVF. So it's also been interesting to document because a lot of times you never see what the independent journey is of the creative and how much work it takes behind the scenes and how long it takes for a show that you see on TV to actually happen. So they've come in maybe like a year and a half into, or a year or so into the process, but they've been seeing, the highs and lows of it. I think it's important for creatives to know that, because don't you feel, Felicia, it's always like that person gets the award and you just like, you praise them for getting it, but we never see, and that's why I've always loved your work, because you've really been transparent to advocate for yourself, to honor your worth, but to also know that it's acknowledge that it's hard,
Yeah. Thank you for that. I want to talk about that hard work. Because there's a lot of our podcast is for storytellers. So what is the process of even developing a one-person show and getting it to mount? And then also the iterative process.
The iterative process is twofold. With a one-woman show, it is imperative that you have an audience to perform in. I do try to kind of be memorized as a lines. That is true, but it is more important that you have audience interaction to understand how your performance is coming out. So for my case, I think for the first 6 or 7 months, I did not. I had like loose semblances of what I was doing, but I wasn't like sticking to these are the actual things that I wanted to do. Mostly because I wanted to figure out, does that joke work? Next week, I'll try another way. But the only way that you can know that that joke works is if you try that joke in front of different audiences and then you get the same response. But so if you keep changing the joke, you never know if that was just an off audience that night, etc. The other thing that is important is I wanted this show to be a stand-up comedy special, but I never worked on it like a traditional stand-up. So traditional stand-ups, you go to comedy clubs, you work on your 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then you kind of stitch it together to make your special. So that it's not always like, it's like they're talking about different things, right? Bits. In this place, I had a specific theme that I was addressing: infertility, a journey towards trying to, or become, to have my Jeheisha Pinot American baby. So I had a thesis. So then I was able to just mount it in its entirety and see like what worked and what didn't. Do you know what I mean?
Can we talk about that? I find that so scary, getting that type of feedback in real time in front of an audience. Like,
I just was sitting there like, she's so brave.
I like my feedback via email, and I can go and cry in a corner. And then, like, how do you manage that real time feedback in that way, especially with something so personal?
You're absolutely right. That is exactly why I never did the comedy clubs, because when I started in stand up in my early 20s in New York, and then also in my 20s in LA and early 30s, I had a hard time being in these environments. They're very male dominated. I was also a Black female comedian. I can't tell you how many times I would show up at a comedy club and they're like, "Are you here to sing?" I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm here to tell jokes." Like, it was just like so incongruous. Like, you would think me signing up for the open mic to sing at like, you have to take so many leaps rather than just be like, she's signing up for the open mic. It's a racism and sexism. It's like the double consciousness of being a Black woman. So I was like, no, I'm not here to sing. I'm here to do stand up. And then there was also, I would say, in the early aughts for sure, and the mid aughts, I think it's now changing for sure, but there was also a standard of like what Black comedy is and like white people comedy. And then the way that I was talking and the kind of things that I wanted to address, which was like feminism, racism, like W.E.B. Du Bois. I want to talk about Pan-Africanism. They were like, "Can you get out of here with this nonsense? Nobody want to hear that. We want to hear Black people talk like this and white people talk like this." And I remember being at the Uptown Comedy Club in New York, and this MC, the host, and you also had to kind of take on a very kind of mask persona to be in comedy. And I am not that. I have, my strength, I think, is vulnerability. My strength is being open, loving. I'm a very touchy person. I'm sensitive. This is the antithesis of stand-up comedy clubs, where it's about bravado. It's about like, taking on that heckler. And so I was doing it, but I was like, this show, I'm definitely not doing it there. So that's why I did the theaters. And then I'll say this other thing that's very important for the iterative process, which is why I want to go on tour and why I've now started and launched a crowdfunding, because LA people know me. And what I noticed was I just get so much low-key grace that I'm going to be funny and they're on the journey with me. Like, I didn't even realize how much just respect on my name that I had. So what would happen is when I went to DC with the show, where nobody knew me, and they were introduced cold to this subject matter, they were like, should I laugh about this? Like, is this lady okay? I don't know. So then I was like, oh, wow, I'm going to have to spend more time at the beginning of the show to have them be primed on who I am. And I can't come out the gate with a bunch of weird stuff because nobody knows me. And so now I've changed the show a little bit to actually add a visual element, like a fun, crazy fever dream of like a primer on what I've been going through that starts the show. So you can kind of have like an amuse-bouche, a kind of a preparation.
Yeah.
And I'm more methodical about slowly pacing the show to get to the craziness versus how I started before, which was fine for LA audience because they're like, cool, this is wild.
Yeah.
But in a city that does not know me, they were like, what is happening? And so it would take like halfway through the show sometimes where they would be moved, but they felt like they couldn't laugh. And so I was like, no, I need to find ways to like, and I wouldn't have known that other than moving the show to different places that are familiar with comedy, places that are familiar with theater, or places that are familiar with one-woman shows. Like each of them need a place. So we're going to Chicago. I want to take it to my hometown of Miami, and I wanted to take it to Atlanta. I feel like those are going to be really great areas and demos. I mean, I'd love to go to Houston, every place, but these three places I feel will really be important for me to get information for my show when I perform it in September to film the special.
People ask me this question too. When is it done? You know what I mean? And I know from a script standpoint, when is it done? But it sounds like too, though, that you have a rigor with your creative practice that is like, I'm going to keep getting deep into this. But I do have this goal of the September show to make it as good as possible, but I'm going to keep getting information and keep bettering this show. Sounds like that's kind of part of your practice.
Yes. So that's why it was very important for me in the top of this year to lock down the date of Dynasty Typewriter, September 25th, because you need a goal and you need an end game to set it up. So that allowed me to understand that that's where I'm going for. And the reason why it was important for me to get it there is I do need to have a filmed version that is not all these iterative processes that I've been doing, because I've had people be like, oh, can I just see it? And I'm like, I really don't want you to see it this way. I'd rather you come to a live performance to take it in, because you're essentially like seeing a rough draft. And so if you want to invest in the show, I think you should come in and see what's happening in a visceral. You need to feel how the audience is taking it in, and you need to feel the energy of it versus like some locked down camera at the back of the room where you're just like watching the show, you know what I mean? But I also know that, not everyone's going to be able to make my show. So I am going to eventually need to have a tangible product that I could present to be like, hey, I'd like to have this on a streaming network. But I do think that if I want bigger investment or like a theatrical release in a theater, I need to have something to show and be like, this is like the thing that I'm presenting. So that is what this is. And I also knew that I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue to kind of say this story as a live physical thing for long periods of time. And if that were going to be the case, then at least I could have the special as a representative of the show that would live on if I then was not like, I wanted to move on to another project. So
what do you feel like are the benefits and maybe the cons of one-woman shows, one solo shows as a platform in that way?
I think a one-woman show really are for people who are very serious about their craft and about performance. I've seen some shows where people feel like, I'm going to mount it because I'm funny and whatever, I can just put it together, or I'm interesting. Even myself, as someone who has like so many years of experience, I see how technical it can be in terms of like how you inflect. That could actually be the laugh. You sitting back, when to take the sip of your water. Like it can be very technical. And so you have to kind of understand it in that way. So the drawbacks of it are going into it thinking that it's going to be, that it's an easy thing to do. And in my case, it's almost like a play in that audiences are not just laughing the whole time. I have them laughing, then feeling like a gut punch, but then I bring them back to laughter, and then another gut punch, and then so it isn't like an experience. So you really have to be able to kind of be a puppet master and do that. And if you are not, I think, theatrically trained, and it doesn't have to be through like a school or anything. I'm just saying having your reps in terms of like having performed a lot and tried it a lot, then I think then it can make you feel like the first time you're doing like oh, I don't know if this is worth it. Look at me, I'm doing this show. It's now it'll be 2 years in September, and I'm still refining it. So that just goes to show you. Maybe I cannot take this as a narrative series.
Mm.
I don't know, but I was always inspired by Chewing Gum, I May Destroy You, Fleabag, even Baby Reindeer that's coming out. These are all comedians who have taken like a traumatic event of their life, done a limited series, and it's really compelling. They're all British. But I was like, why can't we do it as American?
And I
like,
mean,
people?
and Chewing Gum and Baby Reindeer were one people shows.
Yes, so was Fleabag.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that's the trajectory that I want to do. And that's what I'm going to do. That one, I feel like I need more distance with it because I feel like the narrative structure of like a television show is like so oppressive. And Felicia, I think my strength is in performance. So I almost want to just shoot it and then be like, this is what the pilot is. Because every time, because that's how I felt about SPADURA. It's like, if I handed you the script, like, this is it, you could be like, I don't know. But if I embody it, I feel like people are more moved. So I think I'm going to try to raise funds and that's for that.
You're crowdfunding, so it's okay. So that would be one of the goals, is to shoot a pilot version of it. Amazing. Yes. And we're going to make sure we include your crowdfunding link in the show notes.
Thank you so much.
So that people can support for sure. But what I love is that, one, that you have this history of making, that we are definitely big advocates of making your work, and that you're still making your work, and that you got really personal and vulnerable with this piece, and also just the commitment to keep making it better. That's something we talk a lot about. You mentioned it, the work behind the work. Like, a lot of times folks don't understand all that it takes. Like, I got to make sure, as you're saying, I get this inflection right, or so it's just really great to hear that about what you're working on, and that you're still making independently. That's huge.
Thank you. I think a lot of the times with my other past projects, I would do them and set them and forget them and move on to the next. And I was actually really inspired by you because you finished your short film and you really honored it. You were like, I did this and I'm proud of it. And I want to show you all the areas that I did do with this. I think for me sometimes, and this is not about compares to despair, but what I'm not doing this in comparison, but as a learning for myself to really honor that work and not feel like, oh, I did it, I got to move on to the next project, because it feels very much like very grind culture, very capitalism, that you need to make the next widget.
Yeah.
And so this particular thing, I'm being really methodical and intentional, even though it felt very triggering for me to feel like, oh my gosh, because my outside self was like, I'm being thought of as this lady who can't get over not having a baby, and she's gonna talk about it forever and ever and ever. And I was like, is that really what your show is? And who cares if that's what someone else thinks? That's not what your show is. When people come to see your show, they realize that that's not what it is. Just keep going. Why don't you make it to the best that you feel like you can do? And so that's what the barometer that I'm having for myself is like, can I keep pushing it to make it, refine it? Can I take this lump of coal, get it into a diamond, put that pressure, put all those hours in? So yeah, I mean, I think all of my works have been really great, but this particular one, I want to make it the best. Not just be like, did it was good, but like the best I can do,
I love that. And I feel like that's such a great segue into our segment that we like to do called How We Create. It's where we share all forms of inspiration that may have stopped us in our tracks, made us laugh, had us shouting, or even reminded us to rest.
So I was at the American Black Film Festival 20 years later. I did not have a pass. I was going to hustle my way in there.
Was this the most recent one?
Yeah. And I had a little bit of an attitude about it, honestly, Felicia. I was like, I don't feel like I need a pass. I know everybody. My big aha moment was I was outside in the rain of a club trying to get into a party. And I was like, this is some bullshit. Like I felt so like thirst energy, and it didn't feel good with myself about it. I don't want to feel like I have to grovel or beg to get in any place.
Mm-hmm.
And that energy shift, it was another reminder. I do it all the time. Like I think I remember myself and then I forget myself, especially in this industry where you can forget a lot. Because I was also scouting for theaters in Miami. So it wasn't just for ABFF. Like I was scouting for theaters to do the show in Miami. I was there for Father's Day, so celebrating my birthday. So I didn't want to feel tied down to getting a pass to being just there when I had other things I was doing. But my friend was like, you can fill that theater. And I just was like, wow, there's such a belief in me. What is happening within myself to not have the same kind of belief? And so I was like, what is the scariest thing you can do? I was like, ask for $100,000 publicly. The reason why I think it's been helpful to me is like this show in particular has forced me to talk about my work, because in the past I would never talk about my work. I would just kind of do my work and hope people discovered it. So that was a big aha moment to kind of remember that whether or not I hit the goal or not, that I have value and I have worth. You have it all within yourself. You don't have to like need a celebrity endorsement or need the approval of a studio, need all your friends to be like, you are the shit. Like, try to remember that within yourself, you know?
Haley, what you said was so impactful because in therapy, my homework was to draw what makes me special. And at first I was like, I ain't finna do that. I'll get you a bullet point list. I ain't finna draw nothing. But I remembered that I went to the Basquiat exhibit and I bought this little notebook and I bought some colored pencils. So I was like, you know what? Maybe I will do this exercise. And it is like you said, it's a practice. Like every day reminding yourself, like, you got it, you got the sauce, it's in you. Like you don't really need, I mean, you want the validation, of course. We would be talking on this podcast if we didn't, but to know, like, to affirm yourself every day and to really like, even drawing, it felt so simple and so childish, but that's the kind of belief in yourself you have to have like a kid. Like,
I love that. That's a great exercise.
I saw a social media reel that said the opposite of trauma is play. So that's what you were.
I do like that.
We're like, put it on a shirt.
It be church up in here, Dahéli, when we be on. Sometimes it be church.
Yeah, it's a church.
We were talking about niche storytelling. I've really been into, I think Apple is very curated. Apple TV Plus is very curated with the storytelling that they do. And I just wrapped up season 3 of Slow Horses. It was a show that I didn't think I would be able to get into, and I could not stop watching it on my phone. And I was like, how do they get through this? And I know everything happening within 6 episodes. They don't waste a minute of storytelling on that screen. Slow Horses has been my inspiration for this week. Yeah.
House of Dragon is back. I'm obsessed with these messy white folks. I don't know. I know that they messy. They got dragons, and I am tuned in. And then you just remind yourself, I was like, wait a minute, that's your nephew you trying to kill. You know what I mean? Like, it is just so messy. I really appreciate the soap of it because we don't like to consider these shows soap, but that's what it is. But also, the scope of it. I love to listen to the like making of and all of that. Well, we want to thank you, Dahéli. We've only had one other guest on this show. Her name was Roche Jeffrey. So you have made history as the second guest of the Creative Cut Podcast.
I'm your second guest.
Yes.
Oh my God. Thank you. I'm so honored you would have me.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we are thank you so much for sharing your story, for being so honest. And we're just inspired by the work that you're doing. And we want to make sure we drop the link for your crowdfunding campaign. Anything else you want to tell us about SPADURA and how people can support you and your work?
Yes, thank you so much, Felicia, Dria, and Georgette. Yes, the crowdfunding would be amazing. Also, we are going to be in Chicago, July 19th, 20th, and 21st. We'll be hopefully sometime this summer or early fall in Atlanta and Miami. You can always find out any information about the show at SPADURA.com. Yeah, I thank you very, very much for having me. And
yes, well, thank you so much. And thank all of y'all for listening to this installment of the Creative Cut Up podcast. Of course, if you like what you hear, please rate and review. That really helps us to spread this goodness, this creative goodness. And tell a friend. Tell a friend of me.
Yeah, tell a friend.
Tell somebody you don't like. Tell somebody you do like about the Creative Cut Up podcast. Thanks for listening to the Creative Cut Up podcast, a lively and honest space for storytellers that sits at the intersection of craft, business, and independence. Listen to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you dig it, subscribe, rate, review, and please tell a friend. If you need help getting back into your creative practice, check out the Creative Comeback Workbook and Journal. You can also join our newsletter and our We Create Daily community, both of which provide even more resources and opportunities to thrive creatively at thecreatedaily.com. And lastly, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at The Create Daily.